Introduction. There is a question most people never think to ask. Not because it isn't important. Because life keeps them too busy to notice it. Why, despite all our progress, do so many of us still feel as though something essential is missing? We have more information than any generation before us. We can communicate across continents in seconds. We have machines that think, maps that guide us, algorithms that predict us, and endless advice about how to become happier, healthier, wealthier, and more successful. Yet millions of people lie awake at night with the same quiet feeling they have carried for years. I should be happier than this. It is a strange contradiction. Someone finally earns the promotion they dreamed about. The excitement fades within weeks. Someone buys the house they believed would change everything. Soon it simply becomes another place to worry about maintenance. A long-awaited vacation ends, and before the suitcase is unpacked, the mind has already returned to tomorrow's problems. We are surrounded by opportunities to improve our lives. But somewhere beneath all the improvement, a deeper question refuses to disappear. What are we really searching for? Perhaps you have noticed it in yourself. You reach for your phone without thinking. You replay conversations long after they have ended. You promise yourself that next month will be less stressful than this one. You accomplish something important, only to discover that the feeling of enough quietly slips away again. None of these moments seem extraordinary. Together, they tell an extraordinary story. A story about a mind that has learned how to survive, but not always how to be at peace. For centuries, humanity has searched for answers in almost every direction imaginable. We have blamed circumstances. We have blamed other people. We have blamed governments, economies, childhoods, personalities, and luck. Sometimes those explanations contain part of the truth. But only part. There is another possibility. One that is both unsettling and deeply hopeful. What if many of the struggles we experience are not created by life itself, but by invisible patterns through which we experience life? What if we have been trying to solve problems at the surface while their roots remain quietly hidden beneath our awareness? Imagine standing inside a magnificent building you've lived in your entire life. You know every hallway, every staircase, every familiar room. Or so you believe. Then one day, you discover a concealed door behind an ordinary wall. You open it. Inside is an entire wing of the building you never knew existed. Suddenly, everything you thought you understood about the house begins to change. This book is an invitation to open that hidden door. Not because it contains magical answers. It doesn't. Life is too vast for simple formulas. Instead, it contains better questions. Questions capable of changing the way you see yourself. Questions that quietly loosen beliefs you may have carried for decades. Questions that reveal why some habits feel impossible to break, why certain fears return again and again, why success sometimes feels strangely empty, and why genuine freedom has far less to do with circumstances than most of us have been taught. As we travel together, we will explore ideas that touch nearly every part of human experience. Identity, desire, attention, conditioning, relationships, creativity, purpose. The stories we inherit, the stories we unconsciously repeat, and the possibility of writing entirely new ones. Some chapters may challenge assumptions you have never questioned. Others may put words to experiences you have quietly carried for years but never fully understood. You do not need to agree with every idea you encounter. In fact, you shouldn't. This is not a book asking for belief. It is a book inviting investigation. Treat every page as an experiment rather than a conclusion. Bring your own experience into the conversation. Question what you read. Observe your own mind. Notice where you resist. Notice where something unexpectedly feels true. The goal is not to replace one set of beliefs with another. The goal is to learn how to see more clearly. You may discover that the greatest obstacles in your life were never enemies. They were messages written in a language you had never been taught to read. You may find that what felt like weakness was often misunderstood strength. That what seemed like confusion was the beginning of a deeper kind of intelligence. And that many of the answers you have searched for in the outside world have been quietly waiting behind a door you have walked past every day. This journey will not ask you to become someone else. It will ask something far more challenging. To meet the person you have been beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the endless pursuit of becoming. Because there is a version of you that existed before comparison. Before fear taught you to shrink. Before approval became more important than authenticity. Before you confused achievement with fulfillment. Finding that person is not about going backward. It is about seeing clearly for the first time. But before we can discover who we truly are, we must understand why so many of us have spent our lives living inside invisible rooms without ever realizing the doors were unlocked. That is where our journey begins. Chapter 1. The room behind the locked door. Every life has a room we rarely enter. It isn't hidden because someone locked it from the outside. It remains closed because, somewhere along the way, we quietly convinced ourselves that opening it would be dangerous. Most people never notice this room exists. They wake to the sound of an alarm, check their phone before their eyes fully adjust to the morning light, hurry through another day of meetings, messages, responsibilities, and endless decisions. They laugh when expected, work harder than they imagined they would, chase goals they once believed would change everything, and finally collapse into bed carrying an exhaustion that sleep somehow never cures. Then they do it all again. From the outside, life appears to be moving. Inside, something has been standing still for years. Perhaps you've felt it. It appears in unexpected moments. Driving home without remembering the journey. Opening the refrigerator even though you aren't hungry. Checking for a notification you already know isn't there. Celebrating an achievement, only to discover that the satisfaction lasts about as long as the applause. There is nothing dramatically wrong. Yet something feels strangely unfinished. Most people assume this feeling means they need more success, more recognition, more certainty, more experiences, more answers. But what if the feeling comes from something else entirely? What if the mind isn't asking for another achievement? What if it is asking to be understood? That possibility changes everything. Yet before we can understand why, we must investigate one of the oldest misunderstandings about human nature. Imagine walking through a magnificent old mansion. The entrance is beautiful. The windows shine. The walls are perfectly painted. Visitors admire it. It must be wonderful living here, they say. You smile politely. What they cannot see is that dozens of rooms remain locked. Some were closed during childhood. Others during moments of embarrassment. Some after heartbreak. Some after failure. Others after being told who you should become instead of discovering who you already were. The strange thing is that the house never forgets. Even when the doors remain closed for decades, life continues inside those rooms. Dust gathers. Echoes remain. Unfinished conversations wait patiently. Dreams you abandoned still occupy their chairs as though expecting your return. Nothing truly disappears simply because you stop looking at it. It only becomes quieter. And quiet things have an extraordinary way of influencing loud lives. Modern life has become remarkably efficient at helping us decorate the front hallway while ignoring the rest of the house. We optimize calendars, upgrade devices, read productivity books, download meditation apps, track our sleep, track our steps, track our water intake. Sometimes it seems we measure everything except the quality of our own attention. There is a gentle irony in this. We have maps that can guide us across continents within seconds, yet many people spend years unable to explain what truly motivates their own choices. We know how to update software. We rarely ask whether the operating system of our own thinking needs an update. And perhaps that is the deeper mystery. Not that we are lost, but that we have become experts at navigating everywhere except ourselves. Suppose an architect notices a crack spreading across the ceiling. He could repaint it. The room would immediately look better. Visitors might never notice. But the architect understands something important. Paint can hide evidence. It cannot repair foundations. Our emotional lives often work the same way. We become skilled painters. We cover disappointment with busyness, loneliness with entertainment, uncertainty with constant planning, fear with perfectionism, restlessness with endless scrolling. None of these choices are signs of weakness. They are signs that the mind is trying, in the only ways it currently knows, to protect itself. And that realization deserves compassion rather than criticism. Because every protective habit once solved the problem. The question is whether it still does. There is another mystery hiding beneath this one. Why do certain thoughts return again and again, even after we decide to let them go? Why does one careless comment remain alive in memory for years while hundreds of compliments quietly disappear? Why can two people experience the same event yet walk away carrying entirely different worlds inside them? The obvious answer seems to be that life treats people differently. Sometimes that is true. But it is rarely the whole story. There is another force quietly shaping perception. Invisible. Patient. Remarkably consistent. It does not simply influence what we think. It influences what we notice. And what we notice gradually becomes the reality we believe we live in. Understanding this force may become one of the most important discoveries of your life. But not yet. First, we must understand why the mind protects certain stories so fiercely. A child once built a tiny lighthouse from blocks on a beach. Each wave knocked it down. Each time, the child rebuilt it. Not because the structure lasted. Because building it mattered. Adults often reverse this wisdom. We become attached to structures we created years ago. Opinions, identities, labels, success, failure, even suffering. Especially suffering. Sometimes we defend an old story simply because we spent so much of our life building it. Changing feels like betrayal. Remaining the same feels familiar. So we choose familiar. Even when familiar hurts. There is something quietly remarkable about the human mind. It can transform repeated thoughts into unquestioned truths. Repeat a sentence often enough and eventually it stops sounding like an opinion. It begins sounding like reality. I always mess things up. I'm just not confident. People can't be trusted. I'll finally be happy when. Notice the unfinished sentence. I'll finally be happy when. The ending changes from person to person. When I get promoted. When I buy the house. When I find the relationship. When the children grow older. When I retire. The destination keeps moving. Like chasing the horizon. No matter how fast we travel, it politely steps farther away. Not because happiness is impossible. Because we have quietly trained ourselves to place it somewhere we are not. This is where our investigation becomes truly interesting. What if many of the struggles we experience are not created by reality itself, but by invisible blueprints we inherited without realizing it? Blueprints drawn by culture, by fear, by comparison, by old disappointments, by expectations that never belonged to us. If that sounds unsettling, it should. Because anything inherited without examination can quietly become a prison. Even if the walls are beautifully decorated. Perhaps the greatest freedom available to any human being is not the freedom to do whatever we want. It is the freedom to see clearly. To notice the assumptions guiding our choices. To recognize habits before they become identity. To question stories before they become destiny. This kind of freedom arrives quietly. It does not announce itself with fireworks. It often begins with a single honest question. Is what I believe actually true? Simple. Almost ordinary. Yet history has turned on questions exactly like that. So have countless individual lives. Before this journey continues, I would like to offer one invitation. You do not need to agree with everything that follows. In fact, I hope you won't. Agreement can become another comfortable room. Curiosity opens doors. Carry your questions with you. Challenge these pages. Test every idea against your own experience. Truth does not fear investigation. Only illusion asks to be protected. And if, somewhere along the way, you discover that one locked door inside yourself has quietly begun to open, then this journey will already have become worthwhile. Because behind that first door lies another. And behind that one is a room most people spend their entire lives searching for without ever realizing they have been standing outside it all along. That is where our real exploration begins. Chapter 2. The Seed of Curiosity. Every child arrives in the world with a remarkable gift. Curiosity. Long before children learn the rules of society, they learn by looking, touching, asking, comparing, and wondering. To them, the world is not divided into subjects that are acceptable and subjects that are forbidden. There are only mysteries waiting to be explored. Watch a young child for a few minutes. One moment they are fascinated by an ant carrying a crumb larger than itself. The next, they want to know why the sky changes color, why grown-ups whisper in certain conversations, or why one person's experiences seem different from another's. Curiosity does not choose its destination. It simply moves toward the unknown. The difficulty begins when curiosity encounters fear. Not the child's fear. Our fear. Some questions make adults uncomfortable, not because the questions are wrong, but because they awaken uncertainties that adults themselves never had permission to explore. Instead of meeting curiosity with calm understanding, many societies have historically answered it with silence, embarrassment, or punishment. Something subtle happens in that moment. The question disappears from conversation. It does not disappear from the mind. In fact, what cannot be discussed often becomes even more fascinating. Anyone who has ever been told, "Don't look in that box," understands this instinctively. The forbidden object suddenly gains a mysterious importance it never possessed before. It is no longer just a box. It becomes a symbol of something hidden. Human psychology works in remarkably similar ways. The mind is naturally drawn toward what remains unexplained. When understanding is replaced by secrecy, imagination fills the empty space. And imagination is rarely modest. It tends to exaggerate. It turns ordinary things into extraordinary mysteries. Many struggles that appear later in life begin in these small moments, not because curiosity itself is dangerous, but because curiosity was taught to associate itself with shame. Imagine entering a beautiful museum where half the galleries are permanently covered by curtains. No one tells you what is behind them. Visitors simply whisper, avoid eye contact, and quickly walk past. Which rooms would occupy your thoughts? Certainly not the ones standing open. The hidden ones? Not because they contain greater beauty. Because the mind naturally wonders what has been concealed. This pattern extends far beyond childhood. Adults often experience it in different forms. Someone insists they have completely moved on from an old relationship, yet they secretly revisit old messages late at night. A professional achieves the promotion they spent years chasing, only to discover themselves immediately pursuing another milestone. A family purchases the dream home they imagined for a decade, then quietly begins searching for the next improvement before unpacking every moving box. The object changes. The mechanism remains remarkably similar. The mind keeps believing that fulfillment exists just beyond the next unopened door. Yet what if the greatest mystery is not outside us? What if it lives within the habits of our own attention? This is where our investigation begins to reveal another layer. There is an important difference between healthy boundaries and fearful avoidance. Healthy boundaries teach responsibility. Fearful avoidance teaches anxiety. One invites understanding. The other invites obsession. When people are trusted with truthful, age-appropriate understanding, curiosity gradually becomes knowledge. When they are surrounded by silence, the same curiosity often transforms into restless speculation. Understanding brings peace. Mystery without guidance often creates confusion. This principle reaches far beyond any single subject. It shapes the way we think about money, emotions, failure, success, relationships, and even ourselves. Consider how many adults still feel guilty for resting. Some sit down on a quiet Sunday afternoon and almost immediately feel they should be doing something productive. The body has stopped. The mind refuses. No one is forcing them to work. Yet an invisible rule continues to whisper, "Earn your rest." Where did that rule come from? Most people never stop to ask. Invisible lessons often become lifelong companions. They travel with us into careers, marriages, friendships, and parenthood without ever introducing themselves. They quietly influence decisions while remaining almost completely unnoticed. Recognizing them is one of the first acts of genuine freedom. Not because every inherited belief is wrong. Many are deeply valuable. But every inherited belief deserves the opportunity to be examined rather than obeyed automatically. The remarkable thing about awareness is that it rarely arrives with dramatic fanfare. More often, it begins with an ordinary moment. You notice yourself reacting more strongly than the situation requires. You pause. Instead of immediately defending your reaction, you become curious about it. That single pause changes everything. Curiosity directed inward is very different from curiosity directed outward. One gathers information. The other transforms understanding. The first asks, "What is happening?" The second asks, "Why does this matter so much to me?" Those two questions may sound similar. They are worlds apart. The first changes knowledge. The second changes the person asking. Perhaps that is why genuine self-discovery cannot be rushed. It unfolds the way dawn arrives, not in a single dramatic instant, but through a gradual brightening that allows the eyes to adjust. Each insight illuminates another corner of the inner house. Each room entered with honesty becomes a little less intimidating than imagination once suggested. Eventually, you discover something unexpected. Many of the doors you feared opening were never locked. They were simply waiting for someone willing to approach them without judgment. And that realization prepares us for the next stage of our journey. Because if curiosity is the beginning of freedom, then we must ask an even deeper question. Who taught us which parts of ourselves deserved acceptance and which parts had to remain hidden? The answer is far more surprising than it first appears. Chapter 3. When a society teaches people to hide. There is a quiet difference between self-control and self-denial. From a distance they can look almost identical. Both appear disciplined. Both appear orderly. Both seem to promise a better life. But beneath the surface, they grow from entirely different roots. Self-control is born from understanding. Self-denial is often born from fear. One creates freedom. The other creates tension. And tension has an extraordinary habit of searching for an exit. Imagine placing a beach ball underwater. For a moment, it stays exactly where you want it. Push harder, and it sinks even deeper. But the pressure never disappears. The instant your grip weakens, the ball bursts toward the surface with surprising force. Human emotions often behave in much the same way. What we refuse to understand does not quietly vanish. It waits. Sometimes patiently. Sometimes for years. Then one ordinary moment, a stressful week, an unexpected disappointment, a chance encounter becomes enough to release everything that has been held beneath the surface. People often call this losing control. Yet the story began long before that moment. It began the day pressure replaced understanding. Modern life gives us endless opportunities to hide from ourselves. We stay busy enough to avoid difficult conversations. We fill silence with podcasts. We replace loneliness with constant notifications. We mistake distraction for healing. The mind becomes crowded, but not necessarily peaceful. There is a gentle irony in all of this. The more determined we become to appear perfectly composed, the more energy we spend protecting an image that never truly rests. Authenticity, on the other hand, is surprisingly efficient. It requires no performance. Only honesty. That honesty is not always comfortable. It asks us to notice the difference between what we genuinely value and what we have merely inherited. Many of us inherit invisible scripts. Success means never slowing down. Strength means never crying. Love means always knowing what to say. Failure means you are not enough. These ideas often arrive so early in life that they stop feeling like opinions. They become reality itself. Yet every inherited script deserves one important question. Does this belief help me become more fully alive? Some will. Others will quietly limit every decision you make. That question is not rebellion. It is responsibility. A healthy society is not one in which people never struggle. Such a place has never existed. A healthy society is one in which difficult subjects can be approached with honesty instead of shame, with wisdom instead of panic, and with compassion instead of judgment. Growth becomes possible whenever people feel safe enough to tell the truth about their experience. Not because every experience should be celebrated, but because every experience deserves to be understood before it can be transformed. Consider how relationships often begin. Two people meet. Each presents the brightest version of themselves. The conversations sparkle. The future feels limitless. Then ordinary life arrives. Laundry replaces candlelight. Bills replace weekend adventures. Stress replaces certainty. The relationship has not necessarily become worse. It has become real. Real life asks a deeper question than romance ever can. Can two imperfect people continue discovering one another after the excitement of novelty fades? Many believe love disappears at that point. Perhaps something else disappears instead. Perhaps illusion leaves, creating space for intimacy to begin. Real intimacy grows wherever curiosity survives. It asks, "Who are you becoming?" Not, "Why aren't you still the person I imagined?" That single shift changes countless relationships. Curiosity keeps people growing. Assumptions slowly close the door. This pattern appears everywhere. Organizations stop innovating when they believe they already know enough. Families stop listening when they assume they know one another completely. Individuals stop evolving when they become attached to a fixed identity. The most dangerous sentence in personal growth may not be, "I don't know." It may be, "I've already figured myself out." Because human beings are not finished buildings. We are living architecture. Rooms expand. Windows open. Old walls are removed. New foundations are discovered. The work of becoming never truly ends. That realization is not exhausting. It is liberating. You are not required to remain the person you were 10 years ago. Or even last year. Every genuine insight redraws the blueprint a little. Every honest conversation strengthens the structure. Every act of compassion repairs a hidden crack. Transformation rarely arrives all at once. It comes through thousands of small moments in which awareness quietly replaces habit. One conversation. One decision. One courageous question. One unnecessary fear released. Gradually, the inner house begins to feel less like a place of confinement, and more like a place you are grateful to call home. Yet there is one force powerful enough to interrupt this entire process. It influences our ambitions, our relationships, our fears, and even the stories we tell ourselves about happiness. Most people notice its effects every day without recognizing its presence. To understand it is to uncover one of the deepest influences on the human mind. That is where our journey leads next. Chapter 4. The energy that chooses its direction. Every city has a power station. Electricity flows from it day and night, yet the electricity itself has no opinion about what it should become. The same current can illuminate a hospital, power a concert, cool a home on a summer afternoon, or fuel a factory that never sleeps. The energy is neutral. Only its direction changes. Human beings carry a similar kind of energy. It appears as ambition, curiosity, affection, creativity, courage, longing, determination, and passion. Left unexplored, it often feels like restlessness. Understood, it becomes one of the greatest forces for growth a person can experience. This is where many misunderstandings begin. People often imagine that peace is the absence of powerful emotions. In reality, peace is not the disappearance of energy. It is the wise direction of energy. That distinction is easy to overlook, especially in a culture that constantly encourages us to fight, compete, outperform, and prove ourselves. From childhood, many people receive the same invisible lesson. Life is a contest. Someone must win. Someone must lose. Someone must stand above the crowd. Without realizing it, we begin measuring our worth through comparison. A promotion feels meaningful only if someone else did not receive it. A larger house matters because another house is smaller. Recognition becomes addictive because it briefly convinces us that we are finally enough. Yet comparison is a curious architect. It can build impressive lives that never feel like home. A person may collect every symbol of success while privately wondering why satisfaction keeps slipping away. The answer rarely lies in achievement itself. It lies in the direction of attention. When attention is constantly focused outward, the inner world slowly becomes unfamiliar. That unfamiliarity creates an uncomfortable tension. Most people attempt to escape it. Few stop to understand it. Imagine two musicians receiving identical violins. One spends years mastering the instrument. The other blames the violin every time the music sounds unpleasant. The instrument is not the deciding factor. The relationship with the instrument is. Our minds operate in much the same way. Thoughts are tools. Emotions are signals. Neither was designed to become our master. Yet many people spend decades believing every thought that appears. The mind says, "You are falling behind." We believe it. It whispers, "You will only be happy after the next achievement." We obey. It insists, "Everyone else has life figured out." We compare. Rarely do we ask a simple question. Who is speaking? Is this wisdom? Or merely an old habit repeating itself? That single question creates space. And space is where freedom quietly enters. The most profound transformations seldom begin with dramatic decisions. They begin with observation. A woman notices she apologizes before expressing every opinion. A father realizes he has not watched a sunset without checking his phone in years. An entrepreneur discovers that every milestone simply gives birth to another race. A college student recognizes that most of his anxiety comes not from failure but from imagining other people's opinions. These moments seem ordinary. They are not. Awareness changes the relationship between the observer and the experience. Once you can see a pattern, you are no longer completely trapped inside it. History offers countless examples of societies that believed lasting peace could be created through greater force. Weapons became more advanced. Walls became taller. Rules became stricter. Yet fear often remained exactly where it had always been. Sometimes it even grew stronger. External order has undeniable value. Communities need laws. Families need agreements. Organizations require structure. But external order alone cannot produce inner harmony. A perfectly organized calendar cannot heal a restless heart. Nor can 1,000 regulations teach someone how to understand themselves. The foundation of every peaceful society is ultimately built within individual minds. A society cannot consistently express qualities that its people have never cultivated. Compassion cannot be legislated into existence. Wisdom cannot be enforced. Trust cannot be manufactured. These are living qualities that grow from countless personal choices made every day. This explains why lasting cultural change often begins with surprisingly ordinary people. Not famous people. Not powerful people. Ordinary individuals who quietly refuse to pass fear from one generation to the next. Parents who replace shame with conversation. Teachers who reward curiosity instead of blind conformity. Leaders who admit uncertainty instead of pretending to possess every answer. Friends who listen without immediately trying to win an argument. These actions rarely become headlines. Yet civilizations are quietly shaped by them. There is another misunderstanding worth examining. Many people believe conflict begins when two groups disagree. More often, conflict begins much earlier. It begins the moment identity becomes more important than understanding. When protecting an opinion becomes more valuable than discovering the truth, conversation slowly transforms into combat. Questions disappear. Certainty takes their place. Curiosity fades. Labels multiply. The distance between people widens until they no longer see one another as human beings with stories. They see symbols. History repeatedly demonstrates the cost of that transformation. The same mechanism appears in everyday life. A disagreement between spouses becomes a competition to determine who is right. A conversation between coworkers becomes an opportunity to defend status. A political discussion becomes an exercise in proving moral superiority. Everyone leaves exhausted. Very little changes. The goal quietly shifted from understanding reality to protecting identity. The tragedy is not disagreement itself. Disagreement often produces growth. The tragedy is forgetting that another person's experience may contain a piece of reality we have never encountered. Humility keeps discovery alive. Pride quietly closes the door. Perhaps this explains why the wisest people often ask more questions than they answer. They understand that certainty is comfortable, but curiosity is transformative. There is gentle humor in our condition. We spend years searching for people who understand us, yet some of us have never spent an uninterrupted hour honestly listening to ourselves. We travel across oceans to discover new cultures while avoiding the unexplored country within our own minds. We purchase journals about self-discovery and then place them neatly on a shelf, waiting for a future version of ourselves who will somehow have more time. The future, of course, smiles politely and keeps moving. Life does not wait for perfect circumstances. It quietly invites us into awareness today. Not tomorrow. Not after retirement. Not after one more promotion. Today. The remarkable thing is that every moment contains a choice. We can react from yesterday's conditioning. Or we can respond from today's awareness. The difference between those two choices shapes an entire life. Imagine standing beside a river at dawn. The water never argues with the rocks. It does not demand that the landscape become different. It continues flowing, adapting, finding unexpected pathways around every obstacle. Its strength comes not from resistance but from movement. Human wisdom often grows in much the same way. The strongest people are not always those who control the most. Often they are the ones who understand themselves well enough that life no longer needs to become a constant struggle. They still experience disappointment. They still encounter loss. They still face uncertainty. but they are no longer fighting themselves while facing the world. That inner reconciliation changes everything. And yet, even after discovering this, one profound mystery remains. If awareness has the power to transform a life, why do so many people glimpse the truth, feel inspired for a few days, and then quietly return to the same familiar patterns? The answer lies deeper than motivation. It lives in the invisible architecture of habit itself. And that is where our journey must go next. Chapter 5. The Courage to Question. There is a quiet danger that follows every discovery. It is not ignorance. It is certainty. The moment we become convinced that we have reached the final answer, curiosity begins to fade. Questions become inconvenient. New evidence feels threatening. Conversations slowly transform into debates where the goal is no longer understanding, but defending what we already believe. History has repeated this pattern countless times. Entire generations have mistaken temporary understanding for permanent truth. Yet every age has eventually discovered that reality is far more spacious than its conclusions. The map was never the territory. It was only the best sketch available at the time. Perhaps the same is true of our understanding of ourselves. Every generation inherits ideas about what it means to live well, to succeed, to love, to raise children, to build communities, and to find happiness. Some of those ideas become timeless wisdom. Others quietly outlive their usefulness. The challenge is learning the difference. That requires something increasingly rare: the willingness to question without becoming cynical. Real inquiry is not an attack on truth. It is an expression of respect for it. Imagine a scientist who refuses to examine new evidence because an old theory once served humanity well. Progress would stop. Not because the scientist lacked intelligence, but because certainty had replaced investigation. The same thing can happen inside the human mind. Many of us continue living according to emotional blueprints we inherited years ago, never asking whether they still fit the lives we are trying to build. A belief that once protected us can eventually become the very thing that confines us. A habit that once created stability can slowly become resistance to growth. The remarkable thing about human beings is not that we make mistakes. It is that we can become aware of them. Awareness is the beginning of every meaningful transformation. Not guilt. Not shame. Not self-criticism. Awareness. It arrives quietly. Sometimes while watching rain collect on a window. Sometimes during a conversation that unexpectedly lingers in memory. Sometimes after realizing that we have spent years chasing an outcome that no longer feels important. Those moments seem ordinary. Yet they often divide one chapter of life from the next. There is a gentle misconception that maturity means having fewer questions. Perhaps maturity means asking better ones. Instead of asking, "How do I prove I'm right?" we begin asking, "What am I failing to see?" Instead of asking, "How do I protect my identity?" we ask, "Who might I become if I stopped protecting it quite so fiercely?" These questions do not weaken us. They make growth possible. The strongest buildings are not those that never change. They are those designed to adapt without collapsing. Human character follows a similar principle. Flexibility is not the opposite of strength. It is one of its highest expressions. Consider how children learn. They experiment constantly. They fall. They adjust. They try again. Failure is not yet a verdict about who they are. It is simply information. Somewhere along the journey to adulthood, many people lose that relationship with learning. Mistakes become embarrassing. Questions become signs of weakness. Uncertainty becomes something to hide. The result is a peculiar kind of exhaustion. People spend enormous energy appearing confident, while privately wishing someone would give them permission to keep learning. Perhaps that permission has always been ours to give ourselves. A healthy mind is not one that possesses every answer. It is one that remains alive to discovery. This is why humility is far more practical than it first appears. Humility does not mean thinking less of yourself. It means recognizing that reality is always larger than your current understanding of it. That realization is deeply liberating. If your understanding can grow, then your future is not imprisoned by your past. Many of the difficulties that once seemed permanent begin to soften under the light of honest observation. This does not happen overnight. Real transformation rarely does. Growth resembles the restoration of an old cathedral. The foundation is inspected first. Hidden cracks are patiently repaired. Weak beams are reinforced. Windows are cleaned until light enters rooms that have remained dim for years. From the outside, progress appears slow. Inside, everything is changing. The same is true of the inner life. One conversation shifts an old belief. One insight loosens years of unnecessary fear. One act of forgiveness releases a burden carried for decades. These changes are almost invisible in the moment. Yet together they reshape an entire existence. There is another lesson civilization continues to teach us. The tools that once solved yesterday's problems are not always sufficient for tomorrow's challenges. Every era develops methods that fit its circumstances. As life changes, wisdom must continue evolving. This does not require rejecting the past. It requires understanding it. Gratitude for what brought us here should never become resistance to where we must go next. Imagine navigating with an ancient map while standing in a modern city. The map deserves respect. It also deserves context. It was never intended to describe roads that did not yet exist. Our psychological lives demand the same openness. Practices that once helped communities survive may need to be re-examined as humanity acquires deeper insight into the mind, relationships, education, and well-being. Progress does not erase wisdom. It refines it. Perhaps this is the invitation of every generation. Not to preserve every answer unchanged, nor to discard everything that came before, but to become thoughtful custodians of human understanding, to carry forward what nourishes life and to courageously revise what no longer does. That task belongs not only to philosophers, scientists, teachers, or leaders. It belongs to every person willing to examine the architecture of their own mind. Because every transformation that reshapes a culture begins as a transformation within an individual. The future is not built only by new technologies or larger institutions. It is built by people who learn to think more clearly, listen more deeply, and live with greater awareness than the generations before them. And yet, one final mystery remains before our journey can move forward. If awareness has the power to change an individual, why do entire societies so often repeat the same patterns across centuries? The answer is hidden in something far more influential than laws, traditions, or institutions. It lives inside the stories a culture tells itself. Those stories become invisible long before they become powerful. And once we learn to recognize them, we begin to understand not only ourselves, but the civilization we are helping create every single day. Chapter 6. The next evolution is not technology. For thousands of years, humanity has measured progress by looking outward. We built stronger bridges, faster ships, taller cities, more powerful machines. Then computers appeared. The internet connected continents. Artificial intelligence began solving problems that once demanded entire teams of experts. From a distance, it seems we have entered the most advanced age in history. Yet there is a question that quietly refuses to disappear. If our tools have become more intelligent, why do so many people still feel lost? Why does loneliness persist in crowded cities? Why does anxiety grow in an age of unprecedented convenience? Why do families have more ways to communicate than ever before, yet often struggle to truly understand one another? Perhaps we have mistaken one kind of progress for all progress. Technology changes what human beings can do. Wisdom changes how they choose to do it. Without wisdom, every new invention simply magnifies the mind that controls it. A compassionate mind creates extraordinary possibilities. A fearful mind creates more efficient ways to spread fear. The instrument is never the whole story. The musician matters. Imagine placing the world's most advanced navigation system into the hands of someone who has no idea where they wish to go. The technology works perfectly. The journey remains confused. Human civilization sometimes resembles that traveler. We have become astonishingly skilled at increasing speed. We spend far less time asking whether we are moving in the right direction. This is why the future cannot be built by innovation alone. It must also be built by understanding. There is a tendency to imagine that human character can be improved through advice alone. Read another book. Attend another seminar. Listen to another inspiring speech. These experiences can awaken insight. But insight is only a beginning. Transformation asks a deeper question. How do new ways of seeing become new ways of living? That question has no single answer. A healthy life grows from many influences working together. Family, education, friendship, purpose, nutrition, sleep, environment, meaning, community. None of these acts alone. A garden flourishes because sunlight, soil, rain, and careful attention work together over time. Human flourishing follows the same principle. There is another misunderstanding worth examining. People often search for one perfect system that will solve every human problem. History repeatedly shows that such certainty becomes dangerous. Every generation has witnessed ideas presented as complete answers. Some promise perfect equality. Others promise perfect prosperity. Still others promise perfect order. Yet human beings are too complex to fit inside any single formula. Whenever an idea becomes more important than the people it was meant to serve, compassion quietly leaves the room. The healthiest societies are not those that stop questioning. They are those that continue learning. Real science understands this. Every genuine discovery creates new questions. Every breakthrough reveals how much remains unknown. Knowledge expands. Humility deepens. The two grow together. Perhaps personal growth should follow the same pattern. The more clearly you understand yourself, the less interested you become in pretending to know everything. Certainty becomes softer. Curiosity becomes stronger. You begin listening differently. Not to prepare your reply, but to discover what you may have missed. This shift changes relationships more than any communication technique ever could. Being understood is comforting. Seeking to understand is transformative. Children remind us of this almost every day. They ask questions without embarrassment. Why is the moon following the car? Where does the wind sleep? Why do adults always say they're busy? A child is not protecting an image of intelligence. A child is exploring reality. Somewhere along the road to adulthood, many people begin protecting certainty instead of pursuing discovery. The cost is subtle. Learning slows. Wonder fades. Life becomes increasingly predictable not because reality has become smaller, but because attention has become narrower. What if education were designed not merely to fill minds with information, but to cultivate perception? Imagine classrooms where children learned emotional awareness alongside mathematics. Where listening was valued as highly as speaking. Where disagreement became an opportunity to investigate rather than defeat. Where cooperation was practiced instead of merely praised. Knowledge would still matter. But wisdom would have a place beside it. The future may depend less on producing people who know more and more on nurturing people who understand themselves well enough to use knowledge responsibly. The same principle applies to leadership. The greatest danger is rarely power itself. Power simply amplifies character. In the hands of someone ruled by fear, influence becomes control. In the hands of someone grounded in awareness, influence becomes service. This is why the inner life is never a private matter alone. Every unseen habit eventually shapes visible actions. Every unresolved fear quietly influences decisions. Every act of self-understanding ripples outward into families, workplaces, neighborhoods, and communities. Civilizations are built twice. First within human consciousness, then in the world. There is gentle humor in our species. We eagerly update our phones every year. Yet some of us carry beliefs about ourselves that have not been updated since middle school. We replace computers when they become outdated. We rarely ask whether the stories guiding our lives deserve the same careful revision. Perhaps the most courageous form of progress is not replacing machines. It is replacing assumptions that no longer serve life. This requires patience. Growth that lasts is rarely dramatic. It resembles the slow restoration of an ancient library. One forgotten room is opened. Dust is gently cleared away. A window is repaired. Light enters. Then another room. And another. Eventually, what once seemed abandoned becomes a place of extraordinary beauty, not because something entirely new was constructed, but because what was always there was finally allowed to emerge. The human spirit possesses that same quiet resilience. It does not ask us to become someone else. It invites us to become more fully ourselves. Not the self shaped by fear. Not the self performing for approval. But the self that remains when awareness becomes stronger than conditioning. That journey may be the greatest scientific exploration humanity will ever undertake. Not because it measures stars or maps distant galaxies, but because it reveals the universe that has always existed within the observer. And before we can continue, one final question waits patiently in the silence. If a better future begins with a different kind of human being, what is it that quietly shapes a human being from the very beginning? The answer is far older than education, more powerful than information, and far closer than most people ever imagine. Chapter 7. Beyond Thought. There comes a moment in every genuine search when thinking reaches its horizon. Not because thinking has failed, but because it has fulfilled its purpose. Imagine climbing a mountain before sunrise. For hours you follow a winding trail, guided by a map carefully drawn by those who came before you. Every turn makes sense. Every landmark confirms that you are moving in the right direction. Then, almost without warning, you arrive above the clouds. The map can still tell you where you are. It cannot tell you what the sunrise feels like. Some experiences refuse to fit inside explanation. They must be encountered. Modern life has taught us to trust the intellect above almost everything else. We analyze, compare, calculate, categorize, and predict. These are extraordinary abilities. They have allowed humanity to build civilizations, decode the language of the stars, and connect people across oceans. Yet there are questions the intellect can only escort us toward. It cannot answer them on our behalf. No one has ever been reasoned into wonder. No equation has ever fully explained why music can bring tears to someone's eyes. No diagram can completely describe why one quiet conversation changes the direction of a life. There is a form of knowing that arrives only after explanation becomes silent. This chapter is an invitation to that quieter place. Think of the mind as an architect's studio. Ideas are sketches spread across enormous tables. Some become magnificent buildings. Others remain unfinished drawings. Every sketch is valuable because it explores a possibility. But no architect mistakes the blueprint for the home itself. The blueprint points. Living happens elsewhere. Our thoughts perform a similar function. They organize experience. They help us communicate. They allow us to solve problems. Yet many of us gradually begin living inside our blueprints instead of inside reality. We become attached to descriptions rather than direct experience. We say we know someone because we remember their habits. Then one day they surprise us. We realize we were interacting with yesterday's version of them, not the person standing in front of us. The same thing happens with ourselves. Many people carry an identity assembled years earlier. I've always been shy. I'm the responsible one. I'm not creative. I'm not good with people. Perhaps those statements were once accurate descriptions of a season. Over time they quietly became permanent addresses. Yet no living forest remains exactly the same from one year to the next. Why should a human being? There is something wonderfully humbling about watching children discover the world. A child can spend 15 minutes fascinated by the way sunlight dances across a puddle. An adult walks past without noticing. The difference is rarely intelligence. It is attention. Children are still meeting the world. Adults often meet their memories of the world. One experiences. The other remembers. Memory is invaluable. Without it we could not recognize faces, learn languages, or build knowledge. But memory has a limitation. It constantly whispers, "I've seen this before." Awareness quietly asks, "Have you really?" That question opens an entirely different way of living. A traveler who returns to the same city after 20 years often discovers something remarkable. The streets look familiar. The cafes still stand. The river flows where it always has. Yet everything feels different. Has the city changed? Of course. But something else has changed even more. The traveler. Every experience reshapes the observer. And every reshaped observer sees a different world. Perhaps this is why two people can witness the same event and carry away entirely different meanings. Reality arrives. Interpretation follows. Confusing the two creates much of our unnecessary suffering. This becomes especially important in relationships. Imagine a couple having the same disagreement they have had dozens of times before. The words change slightly. The emotional ending remains predictable. Both believe they are responding to the present conversation. Often they are responding to years of accumulated memory. The past quietly borrows the voice of the present. Recognition of this pattern is not a reason for blame. It is an opportunity for freedom. The moment we notice that memory is speaking, we gain the possibility of listening differently. Not reacting. Not suppressing. Simply noticing. Awareness has a curious quality. It does not force change. It creates the conditions in which change becomes natural. Consider a dark room. You do not wrestle with darkness. You introduce light. The darkness has nowhere to remain. Many people approach inner growth as though they must fight every fear, every habit, and every insecurity. What if the greater task is not fighting, but illuminating? The more clearly we understand a pattern, the less power that pattern quietly holds over us. There is gentle humor in the way the human mind operates. We can spend half an hour searching for our glasses while wearing them. We can worry all week about a conversation that the other person forgot before dinner. We rehearse speeches for arguments that never happen. We postpone joy until every problem has been solved, as though life signed a contract agreeing to become perfectly organized. It never does. Fortunately, joy never demanded perfection in the first place. Creativity offers another clue. Ask an artist where a beautiful idea came from, and the answer is rarely precise. A composer may describe hearing a melody arrive before understanding it. A novelist often says a character unexpectedly made a decision the writer had never planned. A scientist spends months gathering evidence, only to wake one morning with a connection that seemed impossible the night before. These moments are not magic. Neither are they merely mechanical. They reveal that the human mind possesses depths we rarely explore during ordinary thinking. Insight often appears after effort, but not directly because of effort. Preparation opens the door. Stillness allows something new to enter. This rhythm can be observed almost everywhere. Gardeners prepare the soil. They cannot command the seed to grow. Teachers create an environment for learning. They cannot force understanding to blossom. Friends offer compassion. They cannot manufacture healing. Life itself contains an element that refuses to be controlled. It can only be invited. Perhaps wisdom belongs to that mysterious category. We do not seize it. We become available to it. That availability requires a rare combination of discipline and surrender. Discipline keeps us showing up. Surrender keeps us from believing we control every outcome. Together they create a remarkable balance. The greatest explorers of human consciousness throughout history shared one quality despite their very different backgrounds. They remained students. Even after profound discoveries. Even after extraordinary accomplishments. They understood that every answer opens another doorway. Every summit reveals another horizon. Every certainty eventually encounters a larger mystery. This realization is not discouraging. It is deeply liberating. It means life is not a problem waiting to be finished. It is a conversation that keeps unfolding. The question, then, is no longer whether we can think more. The question is whether we can learn when to think, and when to become so completely present that reality is finally allowed to speak for itself. That distinction may become one of the most transformative discoveries of this journey. Because the next step is not about collecting more ideas. It is about understanding the silent force that shapes every idea before it is even born. Most people live under its influence every day without realizing it exists. Once you recognize it, you may never experience your own mind in quite the same way again. Epilogue. The journey that never truly ends. If you have reached these final pages, something remarkable has already happened. Not because this book has given you all the answers, but because you chose to keep asking the questions. In a world overflowing with quick solutions, that is a rare act of courage. When this journey began, we stood before a door that most people never notice. A door hidden behind routines, assumptions, inherited beliefs, and the endless momentum of modern life. Together, we opened it. We wandered through forgotten rooms of the mind. We examined invisible habits that quietly shaped our choices. We discovered that many of the walls we believed were permanent had never been built from reality alone. They were built from repetition, fear, memory, and stories that had slowly become invisible through familiarity. Perhaps the most surprising discovery was not that these walls existed. It was that they could be seen. And once something is truly seen, it never holds quite the same power again. You may still experience doubt. You will still encounter disappointment. Life will continue to surprise you. Some mornings your mind will feel beautifully clear. Other mornings it will race through old patterns before you have finished your first cup of coffee. That does not mean you have failed. It means you are human. Transformation has never been about becoming perfect. It has always been about becoming conscious. There is a quiet difference. Perfection asks you to become someone else. Awareness invites you to become more completely yourself. As you leave this book behind, there will be moments when you forget what you have discovered here. That is natural. Old habits have spent years rehearsing their lines. They will occasionally return to the stage. When they do, greet them with curiosity rather than frustration. Notice them. Smile if you can. Then gently return your attention to the present moment. Again. And again. That simple act may become the most important practice of your life. You no longer need to believe every thought that enters your mind. You no longer need to chase every fear or argue with every uncomfortable emotion. You can observe. You can pause. You can choose. That space between impulse and action is where freedom quietly lives. Protect it. There is another realization I hope you carry with you. The world does not become more peaceful because everyone suddenly agrees with one another. It becomes more peaceful each time one person chooses understanding instead of automatic reaction. Every act of patience changes the emotional climate of a family. Every honest conversation reshapes a relationship. Every moment of compassion influences a community in ways that cannot be measured. The future is built through countless invisible moments like these. Never underestimate them. You may never know how a single act of presence alters another person's life. A calm response may stop an argument before it begins. A thoughtful question may help someone discover a truth they have carried within them for years. A moment of genuine listening may become the turning point another human being desperately needed. These things rarely appear in history books. Yet history quietly depends on them. Perhaps the greatest misunderstanding of our time is that significance belongs only to extraordinary people. It does not. The quality of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon matters. The way you speak to the cashier matters. The patience you offer your child matters. The forgiveness you extend to yourself matters. Great lives are not assembled from extraordinary moments alone. They are built from ordinary moments experienced with extraordinary awareness. As you move forward, there will always be another goal to pursue, another mountain to climb, another skill to master. Enjoy those journeys. Dream boldly. Create generously. Work with passion. But remember what this book has quietly whispered from the beginning. Do not postpone your life until the next achievement. Do not postpone your peace until every problem has been solved. Do not postpone your joy until the world finally becomes perfect. Life has never asked for perfection. It has only asked for your presence. One day, years from now, you may find this book again on a shelf. You will not be the same person who first opened it. Some passages will mean something entirely different. Others may finally reveal themselves in ways they could not before. That is the nature of wisdom. It does not change because the words change. It changes because the reader does. And perhaps that has been the quiet purpose of this journey all along. Not to fill your mind with new ideas, but to help you see your own life with new eyes. The universe has never required you to become someone extraordinary before your life could matter. It has only invited you to awaken to the extraordinary life already unfolding within and around you. So walk more slowly when the moment asks for slowness. Laugh more freely when joy appears. Love without keeping score. Listen more deeply than necessary. Question kindly. Create courageously. Rest without guilt. And whenever life begins to feel noisy again, as it inevitably will, remember the first door we opened together. It has never closed. It is still there, waiting quietly. Not somewhere far away. Not at the end of another achievement. Not in another city, another relationship, or another version of yourself. It is here. In this breath. In this moment. In the silent awareness that has been watching your entire journey from the very beginning. And perhaps, if there is one final truth worth carrying into the rest of your life, it is this. The freedom you have been searching for was never hiding from you. It was patiently waiting for you to stop searching long enough to recognize that it had been walking beside you all along. This book ends here. Your radal journey begins now.